Holistic scoring is a topic that I've talked about in previous videos, and I want to focus on how to get a 5 or a 4 just to pass the conversation in this video. Now, this goes for any AP language student, whether you are in French, Spanish, Italian, German, and Chinese. These are the skills that you're going to need, and the rubrics are utilized to grade how well you do in each free response section of the exam. So like I've mentioned in the previous video, and the links are below, holistic scoring is scoring upon task completion first. It's not an average of all the little parts of the rubric and kind of, oh, you got a 5 on the first 4, you got a 3 on the last 4, so you get a 4 total. That's the average. It's not. And in fact, task completion is the first and foremost aspect that they look at before they can even determine if your grammar, vocabulary, and your accent were strong enough to allow for that grade to be higher or sometimes lower. So for example, in the conversation, if you don't complete all of the conversation, then you cannot get a 5. If there are several aspects that you're missing, you're probably not going to get a 4. Does grammar and vocab matter? Of course it does. One thing that I want to address in the conversation that you don't really see in some of the other parts is the register. Now, we see it in the email, but writing and speaking using the same register are two different monsters, because when you write, you have time to course correct and think. When you're speaking, there's much less time. You have 20 seconds. So you're going to get a prompt where you're going to be told what it's about and have 2 minutes to read the instructions, read the conversation as far as what you're expected to do on every part, and then kind of take some notes. Use that time. And there's another video on how to approach the conversation. This video is more how you can score on a conversation. What do you absolutely need first? The video that's posted below, the link is below, that will help you follow the protocol and understand what a reaction is, what details with an S entails. But for all intents and purposes, this video is how to get a 5, a 4, a 3. What are the components to get a high score just to pass? So task completion is number 1. Therefore, if you have a conversation where they tell you to ask questions and you don't get to that, not getting a 5. If they say you need to react to something and you don't, and that's the only thing you might not do, where you can kind of wiggle your way through the rest, that's not as bad. But in the conversation, if you don't ask a question, if you don't answer everything, if your response isn't attuned to what they're asking you about or the topic at all, you will not get a 5 and you will most likely not get a 4. It is all about completing the task and completing it appropriately. In the other speaking, the cultural comparison, you're given a prompt on paper and you just have to respond in 2 minutes, and you can kind of take your time in this. Well, there's only 2 minutes, but in the sense of getting to your point and building up to it. In the conversation, you do not have that luxury. You have to respond within 20 seconds, and you normally have to do more than one thing, such as react, provide details, or provide answer affirmatively, ask follow-up questions. If you don't do everything in the task, you will not get a 5. Okay. If you don't do everything, but you do most of everything with enough examples, you can get a 4. If you don't even do that, but do enough at the task, you can get a 3. Now, vocabulary, grammar, register, I want to talk about register in a minute. Those are factors that can help the grade or hurt the grade. For example, if you're a native speaker, and your Spanish is perfect, let's say Spanish, because that's what I teach, your language use is perfect, you don't make a single mistake as far as grammar, vocabulary, but you don't answer all the questions, you're not going to get a 5. However, if you answer all the questions and follow the protocols, but you are making simple errors that occasionally impede the comprehension, then that's a 4. If you're making a lot of errors or very simplistic errors and not taking, any risk, obviously, if you're using subjunctive and if clauses, that could help as far as your control of grammar. But if you're making a lot of simple mistakes that impede the comprehension, but you do everything as far as the task, that is a 3. Now, if you don't complete the task or you barely complete it, then you're looking in the failing sections. There are a lot of possibilities on this, and the benchmarks are pretty open, a little bit more open on the 1s and 2s. Sometimes it's more difficult because it's not like the cultural comparison where if you only compare one community, you can only get a 1. If you compare one community vastly and you mention a second community, then you can get a 2. It just depends on how much you do within the conversation, because you have 5 prompts and you have to respond to all of them accordingly to get some sort of a passing grade, and your grammar and vocabulary can help or hinder. It can especially help if you're between 2 grades. There are some times where now I grade the cultural comparison, but friends of mine, other readers were grading and they were between 2, but the grammar was really stellar, then that could impact the grade. But again, it's all about the what instead of the how. The what is task completion. The how are the steps that get you there. And part of the how in the conversation that you don't see in you see in the cultural comparison, but not to the same extent, is register. Register is huge. Now, the conversations in the last, 10, 11 years have always been informal. So that means that you should use the informal register. Now, in certain languages such as Spanish, there are countries such as Colombia and Costa Rica that use a lot more of usted than the 2 form, the formal register instead of the informal. That's when you can use usted, the formal register, because there are exceptions in certain countries and communities, but you have to be consistent. And that's one other thing you really have to keep in mind in the conversation over the cultural comparison is register. If you're starting out with usted and you move to 2, that's what also can impact. That's another factor that can impact the score as well. Now, informal can also mean the voz, and you can use that as well. But a lot of students who are heritage speakers might not be from countries that use voz, but that is another factor that you can use. I had several students from Argentina in my class and they use voz, and that was absolutely acceptable, and they got 5s on the exam. So it's really important to understand that in the conversation, just like all of holistic grading, it's all about the what. The how helps get you there and can impact the score for sure, but you can be a native or heritage speaker and speak perfectly and not get a 3, 4, or 5. It is all about task completion. If you think about it, if you don't do the task, you're not going to pass. And that is how you kind of use that information in the conversation. Again, you have to do everything in the conversation to potentially get a 5. Sometimes even a 4 if you don't use enough details. If you are leaving multiple things out, you will not get a 4 or 5. If you are doing everything perfectly as far as the task completion, but your grammar and vocab are not super strong and your register varies a little bit, is a little shaky, then that could be a 3 or a 4. If you speak perfectly, but you don't complete the task, then it's harder to get a 3 or above. That is how teachers or readers, at least some teachers do an average on the rubric, but that is holistic scoring for the conversation. Again, it is about the what and then the how, and the what needs to happen first for anyone to pass. So remember, complete the task so that you can pass. That is the gist of holistic scoring, and that's how it can be applied. And I know it's super vague, every example is different, but that's how it widely applies to the conversation on the AP Language and Culture exam. For more information, you can go to makingspanishable.com and subscribe today, or subscribe under here, and I have playlists for AP language exams. I have a certain one all in Spanish for the AP Spanish language and culture exams. And just hit subscribe, stay tuned, because more videos will be coming out your way as we get into the academic year. And good luck. AP is a wonderful class, and it's really important that you understand how and what you're being assessed on before you actually are assessed. So I hope this video helps, and subscribe for more.